The problem is that the mind doesn't just experience these things, it identifies with them. It stops being the observer and starts believing it is the experience. Okay, what's up?
Do you know what I think? I think your mind lies to you every day. It doesn't simply report reality, it interprets it. Sometimes those interpretations are correct, sometimes they're not. Problems begin when we mistake those interpretations for reality itself. Today, we're going to examine 10 different ways the mind can mislead us and what they all have in common.
I'm all in. Lay 'em on me. Which one are we starting with?
It turns a single experience into a global identity. Imagine you give a presentation at school or work and forget an important point. You leave feeling embarrassed and spend the rest of the day thinking, I'm terrible at public speaking. A single uncomfortable moment becomes evidence that you are permanently flawed, even though you've given successful presentations before.
It's such a brutal jump in logic. One awkward pause, and suddenly you've rewritten your entire autobiography to be the person who can't speak in public. It's like the brain just decides to ignore every single win you've ever had just to focus on that one cringy moment. So, what's actually going on in the mind when it makes that leap?
The mind naturally looks for patterns, and sometimes it creates them too quickly. Instead of treating an event as something that happened, it turns it into something you are. A temporary mistake becomes a lasting identity. This makes an isolated experience feel much more significant than it actually is.
That is such a dangerous shortcut. It's like the brain is trying to be helpful by creating a rule to protect you, but it just ends up building a cage. It's wild how a single data point can override a whole history of success. Ready to move on to number two?
It mistakes emotional and physical reactions for evidence. Imagine you wake up feeling anxious before boarding a plane. Your heart is racing, your palms are sweating, and your stomach feels tight. You conclude that these sensations must mean something bad is about to happen.
It's the ultimate trick. The body is just sending a signal, and the mind immediately turns it into a prophecy. It's like the brain says, I feel terrified, therefore there must be a monster in the room, even if the room is completely empty. It trusts the feeling more than the facts. So, what's actually happening in the mind when it mistakes those physical signals for evidence?
Well, emotions and bodily sensations are real experiences, but they're not necessarily reliable evidence about the outside world. Fear can arise from uncertainty, memory, or imagination just as easily as from genuine danger. The mind often assumes that just because something feels true, it is true.
That's the great trap, isn't it? The feeling of truth is so visceral that it completely drowns out the actual truth. It's like the mind is treating a feeling as a verified report rather than just a reaction. Shall we dive into number three?
It treats possible futures as probable or inevitable. Imagine you send an important text and don't receive a reply. Your thoughts quickly jump to, they must be upset with me. I've ruined the friendship. The relationship is over.
And just like that, you've lived through an entire relationship breakup in your head. Well, the other person is probably just looking for their charger. What's actually going on in the mind when it treats a possibility as an inevitability?
Well, the mind constantly imagines future possibilities, which is useful for planning, but it often fails to distinguish between what could happen and what is actually likely. Once a frightening possibility appears, it can begin to feel like a prediction rather than a hypothesis, producing unnecessary anxiety.
It's basically a glitch in the planning system. The tool meant for survival and preparation just goes rogue and starts treating a what if as a will be. It's like the brain loses the ability to say, this is just a thought, and instead says, this is a news report from the future. Ready to transition to number 4?
Your mind overestimates how much other people notice and judge you. Imagine you spill a drink at a restaurant and become convinced everyone in the room is staring at you. You replay the moment for days, assuming other people remember it just as vividly as you do.
The spotlight effect in full force. It's so funny how we treat our own awkward moments like they're the lead story on the evening news, when in reality, everyone else is too busy worrying about their own spilled drinks to even notice yours. We're the protagonists of our own movies, so we assume we're the protagonists in everyone else's too.
Exactly. Most people are only thinking about themselves. Because you experience your own actions from the inside, they feel much larger than they are to everyone else. Your mind naturally places you at the center of your own experience, making your mistakes seem much more visible than they actually are.
It's like our own internal camera is zoomed in way too close. We're essentially hallucinating a crowd of judges when most people are just wondering if they left the oven on. It's such a taxing way to live, constantly performing for an audience that isn't even watching.
It gives negative experiences far more weight than positive ones. Imagine your manager compliments your work all month long, but offers one piece of criticism during a meeting. By the end of the day, you remember only the criticism and begin wondering whether you're going to get fired.
It's like the mind has a giant neon sign for the one bad thing and a tiny flickering light for the 20 good things. It's honestly exhausting. Could have a perfect day, but one rude comment from a stranger at the grocery store and suddenly the whole day is ruined. The brain just refuses to let the win be the dominant story. So why does the mind do this? What's the reason it weights the negative so much heavier than the positive?
Because throughout human history, noticing threats had greater survival value than dwelling on the positive events. As a result, criticism, rejection, and failure tend to stay in your mind longer, even when they represent only a small part of reality.
It's basically a prehistoric survival instinct that's still running on modern hardware. Our ancestors who ignored the rustle in the bushes probably didn't make it, while the ones who obsessed over the threat survived. Now that same system just makes us obsess over a slightly sharp tone in a manager's email. It's a total mismatch for the world we live in now. Ready for number 6?
It prefers immediate relief over long-term benefit. Imagine you have an important project due next week, but feel overwhelmed. Instead of beginning the work, you spend hours scrolling through social media because it provides an immediate escape from the discomfort.
The classic procrastination loop. It's like the brain is playing a game of future me can deal with this while present me just wants the dopamine hit. We trade a huge amount of future peace for a tiny bit of current comfort, and then we just end up more stressed than we were before we started scrolling.
Exactly. The mind often seeks to reduce unpleasant feelings as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, what brings relief in the moment isn't always what serves you in the long run. Avoidance temporarily reduces stress, but it often allows the original problem to grow larger over time.
It's a trap where the relief actually feeds the anxiety. The more we avoid the thing, the more the mind starts to view that project as a monster, which just makes us want to avoid it even more. It's a vicious cycle. Ready to transition to number 7?
Your mind fills gaps with the first coherent explanation it can generate. Imagine a friend walks past without saying hello. Within seconds, you conclude, they must be angry with me, even though they may have simply been distracted or failed to notice you.
The brain just hates a vacuum. It would rather have a wrong answer than no answer at all. It's like the mind is a storyteller that can't stand a plot hole, so it just improvises a drama to fill the space, and usually it casts us as the villain or the victim. So, what's the internal logic there? Why is the mind so desperate to just pick the first story it finds?
Just like you said, the brain dislikes uncertainty. When information is incomplete, It constructs a story that makes the situation feel understandable. The explanation may be entirely wrong, but having any explanation feels more comfortable than admitting, I don't know.
It's essentially choosing a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable, I don't know. Our brains treat uncertainty like a physical threat. So it'll just invent a narrative to stop that feeling of instability. It's basically just an internal craving for closure, even if that closure is totally fabricated. Ready for number 8?
It mistakes familiar and repeated thoughts for truth. Imagine you repeatedly think, I'm not good enough. After years of hearing that thought in your own mind, it begins to feel like an objective fact, rather than simply a recurring mental habit.
That's the most insidious one of all. It's like the mind just takes a thought and plays it on a loop until it becomes the background noise of your life. And then you start treating that noise as the truth.
Exactly. Familiarity is often mistaken for accuracy. The mind becomes more comfortable with ideas it encounters repeatedly, regardless of whether they're actually true.
That says absolutely nothing about its validity. It's just a loop. We basically gaslight ourselves into believing a lie just because we've heard it 1,000 times. It's wild that the brain can be tricked by its own repetition. Ready for number 9?
It mistakes immediacy for importance. Imagine you receive a notification on your phone while spending time with your family. Even though the message can easily wait until later, you feel compelled to check it immediately because it feels urgent.
The ping of the notification just hijacks the whole room. It's like a mental alarm bell going off, and our brains just react to the noise without actually checking if there's a real fire. We end up sacrificing a meaningful moment with people we love for a piece of data that probably isn't even important. It's total hijacking of our attention.
Urgency creates psychological pressure, making an issue seem more important than it actually is. The mind is drawn toward whatever appears to demand immediate attention, even when more meaningful priorities are present.
It's like the brain has this emergency switch that's way too sensitive. It just flips the switch and shuts everything else out. We're essentially letting a little buzz in our pocket dictate what's valuable in our lives in that moment. It's a total loss of sovereignty. Ready for the final one, number 10?
It protects existing beliefs by filtering the evidence. Imagine you believe you're unlikable. When people smile, compliment you, or invite you to social events, you dismiss those experiences as people just being polite. On the other hand, every awkward interaction becomes proof that your belief is correct.
It's the ultimate filter. The mind basically becomes a bouncer for the truth, letting in everything that fits the narrative and blocking everything that doesn't. What is actually happening in the mind when it starts filtering out the truth just to protect a belief?
Once the mind adopts a belief, it naturally begins organizing new information around it. Evidence that supports the belief is noticed and remembered, while evidence that is contradictory is minimized, ignored, or explained away. This makes beliefs surprisingly resistant to change, even when reality no longer supports them.
It's like the mind is protecting its own ego. By refusing to be wrong, it turns our beliefs into a sort of armor. But instead of protecting us from the world, it just isolates us from the truth. It's honestly a bit tragic that the brain would rather live in a comfortable lie than deal with the friction of being wrong. So, that's 10. We've covered everything from the spotlight effect to the confirmation bias bouncer. What's the common thread here? What is the one thing all of these lies have in common?
Well, I have a hunch, but I would like to ask GPT and you if you'd like to answer.
I think the common thread is fusion, whether it's a physical sensation, a random thought, or a memory. The problem is that the mind doesn't just experience these things, it identifies with them. It stops being the observer and starts believing it is the experience. It's that lack of distance between the awareness and the mental event that lets these lies take root. Am I close?
I think you're on the right track. I also think the art of objectification can help to resolve these mental mistakes. In previous videos, we introduced a 5-step process that teaches us how to recognize that our thoughts, emotions, impulses, memories, and beliefs are merely experiences occurring within us, rather than automatic truths, commands, or expressions of who we are. By creating psychological distance from these experiences, we can examine them more objectively before deciding whether they deserve our belief or influence. I believe this 5-step process can help us recognize and correct these 10 mental mistakes. I'd like to see whether GPT arrives at the same conclusion. So these are the 2 questions I want to ask GPT. Do all 10 mistakes stem from one unifying problem? If so, explain what the underlying problem is. If not, what is the underlying problem or set of problems? The second question is, does the art of objectification address and correct the errors? If so, how? If not, what else might be necessary? Here's what GPT had to say.
Yes, I think these 10 errors are unified by a common underlying problem. Although they appear to describe different biases, they all involve the mind relating to its own mental activity and critically. In each case, thoughts, emotions, memories, predictions, bodily sensations, or interpretations are treated as reality rather than as mental events that require evaluation. The mind moves too quickly from experience to conclusion. It identifies with its own output instead of examining it. Whether it is turning a mistake into an identity, mistaking anxiety for danger, assuming a possible future is inevitable, or filtering evidence to preserve an existing belief, the underlying pattern is the same: insufficient psychological distance between awareness and what appears within awareness. Viewed this way, the art of objectification directly targets the common mechanism behind these errors. Pausing interrupts the automatic reaction. Becoming aware brings the mental event into consciousness before behavior follows. Objectifying changes the relationship to the experience by recognizing, this is a thought, this is fear, or this is a prediction, rather than unconsciously treating it as reality. Once the experience has been objectified, it becomes something that can be examined instead of something that simply controls perception. The investigate step addresses the specific distortions themselves. It asks questions such as, is this conclusion supported by evidence? Am I confusing possibility with probability? Am I treating one event as my entire identity? Am I overlooking contradictory evidence? Could there be another explanation? Each of the 10 mental errors can be challenged through careful investigation because each depends upon an assumption that has not yet been examined. Finally, respond replaces automatic reaction with deliberate choice. Instead of obeying whatever the mind produces first, the person chooses an action based on a broader and more accurate understanding of the situation. This does not guarantee perfect thinking. Human cognition will always produce shortcuts and biases, but it greatly reduces their influence because the person is no longer treating every mental event as self-evidently true. In that sense, the art of objectification is not merely another technique for managing thoughts. It is a higher-order process for changing one's relationship to mental activity itself. The 10 errors are examples of what happens when thoughts and emotions are experienced without sufficient separation. Objectification creates that separation, investigation evaluates what appears, and deliberate response restores choice. If there is one unifying solution to these 10 mistakes, it is developing the capacity to observe the mind before believing the mind.
Wow, GPT really went for the gold with that one. I love how it described objectification as a higher order process. It's not just a little hack to feel better. It's a total operating system upgrade for how you interact with your own brain. The part about observing the mind before believing the mind is such a perfect summary. It's basically the difference between being the passenger in a car with no brakes and actually being the one in the driver's seat.
To summarize, although these 10 examples seem very different, they all involve the same mistake. A thought, emotion, prediction, interpretation, or belief is experienced as though it were reality itself. Instead of being observed, it's immediately believed. What I hope people take away from this video is that the mind is fallible and not everything that it generates should be assumed to be true or an accurate reflection of reality.
That's the real power of this whole thing. Once you realize the mind is more of a storyteller than a reporter, you stop being a prisoner to every random thought that pops up. It gives you your agency back.
The art of objectification teaches you how to interrupt that process. It helps you recognize your thoughts, emotions, memories, beliefs, and impulses as internal experiences that can be observed and examined before deciding whether they're actually true. If you'd like to explore the art of objectification in more depth, I have a 2-part series that explains what it is. The first video teaches you how to enter the present moment, so you can become aware of your internal experiences. The second teaches you how to separate yourself from your thoughts, emotions, impulses, memories, and beliefs, so they become objects of awareness instead of automatic truths about who you are. I think they'll change the way you think about your own mind. I've included links to both of those videos in the description below. Maya, do you have any closing thoughts or questions for the audience?
I'd love to. I think the biggest thing I'd tell them is that this isn't about fighting your mind or trying to force it to stop lying, because it's always going to do that. It's just what brains do. The real magic happens when you stop taking your own thoughts so seriously. Once you realize that a thought is just a suggestion and not a command, you finally get to decide who you actually want to be. It's the ultimate act of freedom.
Thank you, Maya. I think we'll end that here.
You're so welcome. That was a great session. I can't wait to see how the final video turns out.
Take care.
You too. Catch you later.